Welcome to Beneath the Bible, where we're helping you dig deeper and uncover the world beneath the sacred book. In this series, we're looking at the historical background of the Bible. We'll look at the different time periods that historians and archaeologists use as they look at the ancient world, as well as a few important people and places along the way. We'll also look at a few ways these historical overviews can help us see the Bible in its context. In this video, we're going to look at the early Iron Age. The Iron Age is the period following the Bronze Age. The Iron Age, like the Bronze Age, is divided into sub-periods by archaeologists and historians. This terminology is used to identify and discuss the changes in culture and social-political structures throughout a given time period. In the southern Levant, the Iron Age begins after the Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BC. The early Iron Age, or Iron I, spans roughly 2 centuries, ending in 1000 BC.
Following the Bronze Age collapse, the major imperial forces of the Bronze Age were gone, or greatly diminished, which resulted in large migrations of people around the Near East. In Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, the Hittites were gone and smaller kingdoms took their place. These smaller kingdoms included Phrygia, the kingdoms ruled by the legendary King Midas, though he is said to have lived after the period we're talking about. And in Syria, many smaller kingdoms arose following the demise of the Hittite and Mitannian kingdoms. These Syro-Hittite or Neo-Hittite states were a diverse group of city-states and small regional states that used both an Anatolian language called Luvian and another language, Aramean. This language was introduced to the area by an ethnic group of the same name, which moved into and controlled much of Syria during the early Iron Age. Finally, the Canaanite or Phoenician language was spoken by the Canaanites who lived in the southern Levant. In Egypt, the early Iron Age is marked by the 20th dynasty, the last dynasty of the New Kingdom. Its last great pharaoh, Ramses III, ruled during much of the first quarter of the early Iron Age, and his kingdom included parts of the southern Levant. Ramses III ruled from 1186 to 1155 BC. Records from his reign and shortly after it discuss military conflicts between Ramses and the Sea Peoples, including the Philistines, as we briefly discussed in our previous video on the Bronze Age collapse, which you can see here. The Philistines were part of a larger confederation that Ramses claims to have defeated in a series of battles. He then claims to have settled these people in fortresses. There's debate among archaeologists and historians, however, about whether Ramses defeated them or the Philistines took the fortresses on their own. Either way, the Philistines settled in cities along the southern coast of the Levant, and they established themselves in 5 main cities called the Pentapolis cities: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. This development is significant because it can be seen as part of a wider trend of diminishing Egyptian influence outside of Egypt proper. Canaanite cities in the southern Levant were destroyed during the Bronze Age collapse, and Egyptian influence over the area became restricted to a series of fortresses like Bet Shan in the Jezreel Valley. Within Egypt, the 20th dynasty prospered and produced works of literature that are important for our understanding of this world. These texts include wisdom literature such as the instruction of Amenemope, as well as geographical and historical works like the story of Wenamun and the Onomasticon of Amenemope. In the southern Levant, the Iron Age is an incredibly important and formative period. In addition to the Philistines and alongside the existing Canaanite population, other people groups emerged during this period. We recognize some of these groups from the Bible, such as the Ammonites, Moabites, Edomites, and of course the Israelites. During the Iron I, there was a major settlement pattern shift in the highlands of Canaan. Dozens of small, unfortified, rural settlements were founded there. These sites represent in part the emergence of an ancient Israel as an archaeologically distinct people group. Archaeological surveys suggest that these settlements were founded first in the east and then moved west. They largely share the same material culture as the Canaanites from the late Bronze Age, particularly in their ceramics, but their artifacts are a bit more utilitarian and simplified. In general, they lack any sort of decoration. And these sites exhibit a pork taboo, almost completely avoiding it. And they lack the easily recognizable Philistine ceramics of the period, along with a number of other very distinct features. We'll be digging into the distinctive elements of Israelite material culture in future videos, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss them.
The emergence of ancient Israel as an archaeological and historical entity is obviously incredibly important. The settlement and emergence of Israel has been the focus of a lot of academic study, and in the future we'll address some of that literature. But for now, suffice it to say that this period is important because it is the time of Israel's ethnogenesis. It is during this period that an entity we know as Israel began to emerge and define itself. The contours and struggles to balance Israel's identity and boundaries over and against the people around them can be seen in both the archaeological evidence and the biblical text. This is the period when, according to the end of the book of Judges, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. There was no king, and there was no central government. There was no one to organize the construction of fortifications and major building projects. There were no cities, only small agrarian settlements. Local leaders resolved issues locally, and this is reflected in many of the accounts in Judges. A good example of a biblical story that represents life in this period is Samson. His story takes place in a very limited geographical scope, but it shows the back and forth movement that was possible between Israelite and Philistine territory. In this period, we see Israel defining itself over and against rival people groups, particularly the Philistines, whom we know arrived in the land during the reign of Ramses III at the end of the Bronze Age. This period also has many important implications for how we understand the literary history of the Bible. The Egyptian wisdom text, the Instruction of Amenemope, comes from late in this period, and it has some interesting parallels with the Bible, particularly Proverbs 22 and 23. For example, the Instruction of Amenemope states, "Toil not after riches. If stolen goods are brought to you, they remain not overnight with you. They have made themselves wings like geese and have flown into the heavens." Proverbs 23, 4 and 5 says, "Toil not to become rich, and cease from dishonest gain. For wealth makes wings for itself, like an eagle that flies to the heavens." There are numerous other parallels where Proverbs and the Instruction of Amenemope repeat similar sentiments using similar language. The Instruction of Amenemope was composed earlier than Proverbs, and the relationship between the two is debated. Some have argued that Proverbs copies from or otherwise relies on the Instruction of Amenemope. Others have argued that wisdom literature in the ancient world is similar in many places, so these parallels exist because of a shared genre and tradition. Either way, it's thought-provoking to consider the relationship between them and the implications for how we think of biblical wisdom and Israel's relationship with its wider world. The interconnections between Israel and its neighbors only intensified in the next time period, the Iron II. But we'll have to save that for another video. Thanks for joining us for this Beneath the Bible video. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, we've included some references and resources in the description below. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like it, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter @BeneaththeBible. If you learned something new today, take a minute to share this video with your friends. And until next time, keep digging.